Old North End, where I attended for 2 years at St. Joseph's, which was called back then, or well, actually it was called Nazareth. And then from there, went up to Edmonds Junior High, where the elementary now, that was the junior high, and then the high school below it towards Union Street. Um, After school, the AMP kept me on as a full-time meat cutter for a year when I joined the Burlington Fire Department for 10 years. I left the fire department to start Queen City Fire Equipment with a partner. Uh, uh, Partway through that time, I was 2 years in the legislature in 74 and 75. When the mayor asked me if I would leave the legislature and come to work for him at City Hall for 2.5 years as assistant city clerk, then for 13 years in the assessor's office. During that time, had this distinction of organizing and overseeing the first general reappraisal of the entire city that hadn't happened in 45 years. Didn't make too many friends doing that, but it was a difficult job. And somewhere around that time is when I got to know you, Bill. Before I went to the City Hall, I was on the street commission as well as the sewage disposal commission, which it was called then rather than wastewater. The two commissions had the same three commissioners so that there'd be an overlay and information. Served 1 year as chair of that. And when I went to the city, I had to resign from that. So continued with the city until after I retired. I went to the Chittenden County Courthouse across from Nectar's, working as a court officer in the courtroom for 20 years. After that, my wife became my boss and still is. So that's a little bit of my background.
So who appointed you, what mayor appointed you city to the clerk's job?
Mayor Gordon Paquette.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then 2.5 years later, he asked me to go down to the assessor's office, where I was deputy assessor for 4 years. And then when Assessor John Fitzpatrick retired, I was appointed as the city assessor. And during that time is when Bernie Sanders was elected mayor, which probably meant I was going to lose my job. But Bernie called me the night before the appointment and said, "I'm appointing you tomorrow." I said, "Thank you," and hung up. That was the only conversation I had with him. So he was my boss for the next 8 years.
Okay.
And got along very well with him.
Oh, good. Glad you had, sounds like a good, interesting career. Tom?
Oh, God.
Tom, what was your neighborhood? And
well, I sort of think I had three neighborhoods in Burlington. Bill, when I was born, we lived out on Staniford Road in the New North End for a few years. And then we moved up to South Prospect Street, roughly between Maple Street and Cliff Street. But we've always had a family camp out at Star Farm Beach. And that's, I guess, my favorite neighborhood. Some of the fondest memories, as I think you always do, of where you spent your summers. So I went to Taft School, Edmonds Junior High School, Burlington High School. Went away to school, came back as a lawyer. And one of the first things I did when I moved back to Burlington was I got on the cemetery commission. I figure you got to start someplace in your public life. But that was a very good place to learn the nuts and bolts of city government and what the commission system was like. And I enjoyed that work. I had to leave the cemetery commission when I moved to Shelburne in the 80s. But I always consider Burlington to be my hometown. I've got a few things to say later on, Bill, about some of the history of the churches in Burlington, but a lot of people's minds are occupied right now with what's going to happen to what used to be the Burlington Square Mall. And I did some legal work years and years ago for St. Paul's Episcopal Church, which at one point was on a big piece of that property. And there were times in the 70s and 80s when no one knew what the heck was going to happen to the mall. So to some extent, we've been there before.
Okay. Joey, do you want to chime in on your pedigree?
Well, yes, I just, like you, Tom, I also started my life on Stanford Road. My mother and father bought a home there before Oakland Terrace was built. And I lived there and walked from Stanford Road to Thayer School as a kindergartner. And then my father decided that it was too far for him to go way out there for lunch, so that we had to move into town so it would be easier for him to come home for lunch. And that's when we moved to North Prospect Street. And that was really the neighborhood that I remember growing up. And my mother owned that house until about 10, 15 years before she died. So it was really a wonderful home to grow up in.
Joey, you said way out there. I remember when Father Tenning was going to build that St. Mark's Church.
Yes.
Way out on North Avenue.
My mother and father were very involved in the design and building of that church, and they were very proud of it. And that was where I was baptized.
Oh,
It
but
was
that
very
was way,
liturgically ahead of itself.
it's true. I mean, the design is quite unique, but again, it was way out there. Who's going to go out there to church?
Right. Yeah.
And here we are, surrounded. Okay, all right. Let's start with some easy questions. Viewers, if you have any questions or comments, give us a call, 862-3966. A lot of things have changed with Stump the Chumps over the years, but the number is the same, 862-3966, with questions or comments or stories. Now, let's start out with some easy questions. The Boys and Girls Club is one of the most stellar and successful services in the city. Where was the original Boys Club located? Who knows the answer to that one? Rosaire?
Was it on Cherry Street, just, was it Bank Street, just below Church Street?
No? Joey? You might know, we asked this question a while back, but Tom, do you know?
You stumped me.
Joey, you remember?
I'm embarrassed now that you told me I should know. Because I don't.
Sorry.
I don't know.
It was right next to the Cathedral Grammar School. There was a little playground in front of Cathedral Grammar School, and the red brick building was the Boys Club there.
That's on St. Paul Street?
No, on Cherry Street.
On Cherry Street.
So you were close, was there?
Yeah, I remembered seeing it around that neighborhood, but I couldn't place it exactly.
Okay, now you probably don't remember the name of the first, or one of the directors, very famous name in Burlington.
Cummings?
Yes, okay, you get that right. So callers, did you have that answer in your mind? I know I talked to people outside of my daily living. They say, oh, I knew all those answers. I said, why don't you call in, 862-3966. Anyway, they didn't, but we got those answers eventually. All right, you remember the music festival? Remember we have the music festival in Burlington? Do you have any memories of that, of the parades going down Church Street and the Memorial Auditorium? Do you have any memories of that at all?
Bands from all the schools all over the state. It took place in the mid or late part of May, somewhere around there. And some of those days, I remember it would be so hot, it was scorching, and I felt so bad for the people in those wool uniforms, the students in wool uniforms marching, especially the drummers. Yeah, that was a really big parade.
And you had the guys with the and the twirlers. Oh man, all my classmates girls classmates, they wanted to be twirlers, and they practiced twirling those things around left and right through their fingers, and that was quite an event for Burlington. Brought a lot of people downtown. And
Bill, we called them majorettes. We didn't call them twirlers.
You're right, Joey. You're right.
Yeah, they would come down. they'd organize up towards Edmonds, and then they would come down Main Street, go up Church Street to Pearl, down to St. Paul, head down St. Paul back to Main, and that's about where they would break up, and the buses would go down and pick them up.
Okay, now do you remember who the musical directors were, the famous musical directors were of Cathedral?
Lechner.
And for Burlington?
Um,
Yeah, Joe Lechner's right. Joe Lechner was the director for many years of the Cathedral High School.
no, I don't.
And he
remember.
also directed the Cathedral Choir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did he ever throw a book? Remember the stories about Joe Lechner? He used to throw a book if you were singing in the choir, you didn't pay attention, he'd throw the book at you. You ever hear those stories?
Yeah, he was very stern.
Very.
He was.
Who's
Wasn't he
the-
also? Wasn't he also the director of the band that would play in the shelter at Battery
Yes.
Park?
The Burlington Band.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, who's the Burlington band director? I think I've got his name right, but is it Adrian Holmes ring a bell?
No.
Tom?
Could be, that was, when I was coming through the Burlington school system, it was Richard Yanni.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Footnote, last winter, when I was down in Melbourne with another friend that was traveling with us, and she was good friends with Richard and his wife, and we stopped and visited him in Florida. His wife is pretty much wheelchair bound, but yeah, my son had him both at Edmonds Junior High, and then in the high school he had moved over there. So my son had him all those years. But and then his family came from Rutland, where the father was a very well-known director down there, and would do what you might call the city band in the shelters down in the park there. And his older brother was up at the Union High School outside of Morrisville. What's it called up there? And he was
People's Academy.
no, outside the Union High School. Lamoille Union High, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he was his older brother Richard was the music director up there for a large number of years until he retired.
Okay, now you've already anticipated you already gave the answer to my next question is, what is the memorial to Joe Lechner? So you know what that is, right?
The
The
memorial?
band shell.
What's that, Joey?
The band shell in Battery
Yes.
Park.
Yep, the band shell in Battery Park. Have you ever been to the Battery Park lately to attend a concert?
Mm-hmm.
Have you? Okay, good. I think it's still getting some pretty good crowds there. I have an issue with opening of the Battery Park roadway there, but I lose that battle. Joey, before the program, you talked to me about some conflict with Don Mealy and Rice.
Well, I think I was remembering with Tom having a discussion
Tom
about Jean Robinson when we honored her with a resolution in Montpelier, and she had such a terrific coaching career, both at Burlington High School and then at Essex. And I was telling Bill that I remember she had to fight with my uncle Don Maley to get gym time at the old BHS for practices. But later on, one of his great pleasures was to write weekly fan letters to her as she continued her just terrific, successful career as a coach. But I remember, Tom, that you were very fond of her and had some memories of Jean.
Yes. Her nickname, as I recall, was Speedy Jean Robinson. She was always on the move, and I had her for both math and science in first couple of years of junior high school at Edmonds. And I also remember her. She drove an Austin Healey 3000.
Oh wow!
Convertible, and that was a big statement back in those days for someone her to drive a sports car like that.
Now, okay, let's shift a couple of gears here, so to speak. I want to get into gasoline stations. I don't know. I know you also bring your automobile to a gas station to get your oil changed at 2,000 miles. And in my family, I tried to save money, so I changed my own oil, get underneath the car, get rid of that little plug, and drain the oil. And those days, you put the oil down a sewer. I mean, that's a mortal sin today. And so I thought I'd be a guy before my time, and I tried to teach my daughter to go underneath the car. I said, Ellen, go to the daughter, and this is why you take the car out and do this. And, I thought I was doing a real favor. That's the last time she did that.
Yeah, and what do you do with the oil
Anyway,
nowadays?
so what was your favorite? Name me some gas stations. Who were some of the gas stations on Shelburne Road that you might remember?
On Shelburne Road.
Well, I remember Winnie Whittemore, who was at the Rotary, one of the Rotary. There was, at one point, there was 2 or maybe 3 gas stations by the Rotary.
Yep, and let's see.
The
Was one of them named Crosby?
Mm.
Don Crosby?
Yeah, right
Yeah.
on the corner of Ledge.
Yeah, and I think Hogan was the name of one of the others. I've forgotten his first name, but he was sort of opposite Christ the King School. But I've got a question for maybe our audience and you guys. There was a station operator on Shelburne Road whose son was a NASCAR driver, and obviously a man of fame in the NASCAR. You remember the last name of this station operator and the name of his son.
Right.
Well, let's think about that. So, viewers, call in 862-3966. So, Rosaire, how about you've lived up on North Avenue a long time. Some of those, do you remember the name of Louis Modica?
Oh, very well. And when I was in the fire department, towards the last few years, his son David came to work there. And Louis had a gas station right on the corner of North and North Avenue.
Yep.
The Sunoco station. It was a small station back then. Next door was Solomon's dry cleaning. Yeah, and then David, after I started Queen City Fire Equipment, about 3-4 years later, Dave actually came to work for us on his days off from the fire department to sell the kind of equipment that went to fire departments for ambulance, for their rescue wagons and stuff like that. Oh yeah.
And how about anybody remember Cliff Amore?
Oh, very well. Down on around 110, I think it was 110 Maple Street, just behind the bus terminal. He did retreads there. The gas station set back a little ways, and he would do retreads of tires there. Yeah. And
Yes, there were gas stations all over the city. There was one opposite Smalley Park. What was his name?
Offices.
Tom, doesn't ring a bell. We're opposite Smalley Park there.
Well, I'm thinking of Leo Duncan.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I called him.
Yes.
Yep. Leo was I call him the mayor of St. Paul Street.
Yeah.
And so he used to
And
he used to park his customers' cars out in the street and on the tree belt. And that wasn't too kosher, but he was a nice guy, and he did.
He's still around.
Oh, yeah.
He is, huh?
When I worked at the courthouse, there was 3 or 4 of the ladies. They really liked leaving their car. They would leave their car with him there in the morning and walk up to the courthouse, then go down and pick it up at night. And the reason was he was just so kind and helpful with the women. They really liked him. So that's the kind of guy Bill was. Another gas station, I wonder if you guys can remember, where the Nickelodeon Theater is now. There was a gas station on that corner before the Nickelodeon. And in the early 50s, up at the end of the parking lot, up against the brick building that was Smith, Bell and Haught for a long time, is where the Miss Burlington Diner was. which
Mhm.
was Stratty Lyon's father that ran that. And that's where Stratty learned to be a short order cook and everything. And at some point around, must have been around the mid to late 50s, they bought the lot on Bank Street and brought in a brand new uh, diner to put in there. But that's where they originally started down there.
No.
Bill, Bill, I
Go
don't
ahead.
know. I don't know if this is the answer to your question about the NASCAR driver, but there was for years a gas station in Shelburne, owned by the LePage family,
That's the one.
and one of his sons did pretty well for a number of years on NASCAR, and I think is still in. He's no longer driving, but he's still involved somewhere in that industry.
Bingo, you get that right.
That's who it was.
Yep, Ray LePage's son, and you mentioned Winnie Whittemore Station. Ray LePage occupied that at one time as well, and which is now called the Spot, which is right next to Dunkin' Donuts. So, viewers, I'm sorry, Tom Little preempted you, and you didn't call in with the answer, and Tom got the correct answer.
But was that a Burlington gas station, Bill?
Yeah, yes, it was the corner of Alfred Street and Shelburne Road.
Okay.
Yeah. Now
We went to a Gulf station on the corner of Main and South Winooski Avenue. A man named Foreman Boudreau ran that, and my father had a parking space in that gas station, and we had the luxury of driving in and say, "Fill it up, Mr. Boudreau," and charge it to my father.
Another station, Bill, another station that was very well known and respected by the people that worked downtown was Corey's on the corner of Bank and St. Paul,
Yes.
where there's a bank now.
Yep.
Or is it a bank or a credit union? I
Ain't
forget
it
which.
St.
A multi-story brick building. But Corey was there for a lot of years until they bought him out to put that in.
And then we have that very famous one on Shelburne Road. Come on, guys and gals.
Kegels.
Yes. Freckles Kegel ran that for years, and his son. And, you look at that building today, and it looks so sad there. It's all isolated, and
He just gave up the business, a couple of years ago.
yeah. And I think
What's going to go there? Do you know?
No, I know, but who ran it last? He has another place on Sears Lane. He set up another shop, but so yeah, it's good that his son is still in business there on Sears Lane. I want to remind folks that all this is great, this Burlington area trivia program, but I expect that you're all online with Bob Blanchard and his Burlington Memories. There's a guy that does so much work and research on just about everything that happens in Burlington. So he does a great job in Burlington Memories. And another is Pete Shagnon. Do you read those, Joey? Do you look at those online?
I read Bob Blanchard's all the time. I still haven't joined Pete Shagnon's group.
Yeah. Well, it conjures up a whole lot of memories, but Bob does a real good job in doing research at UVM, and we're lucky to have those.
Hey, Bill, that Bob Blanchard, is he the son of the Bob Blanchard that we knew back in our day that was was an alderman?
Yes.
He's Bill Blanchard's son.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, he is Bill Blanchard's son.
Not Bob.
Bill Blanchard.
Bill Blanchard's son. Bob Blanchard was a counselor that lived on Flint Avenue,
yes.
After which Blanchard Beach is named.
Oh.
Yeah, I was
Tom Little, did you have something about some neighborhoods that you were going to talk about?
I had, I mentioned I had some sort of church questions or church history that I sort of grew up with. I think most people are probably familiar to some extent with the Greek Orthodox Church. Speaking of the Rotary, right on the uphill side of the Rotary, I think it's the Dormition of the Mother of God. But did you know what that church building started out as?
No. I
It was
don't.
No, I'm curious because it's quite a structure.
Joey?
No, I don't, Tom.
Okay, it was an Episcopal church.
Oh,
Oh,
And in the many years ago, many of the members of the Greek community in the Burlington area were attended the Episcopal churches for one reason or another. And I believe sometime in the 50s, the early 60s, a decision was made to make that a Greek Orthodox church. And when it was originally built, it was a what you might call a mission church of St. Paul's Church downtown. And that was considered to be sort of out on the outer edge of Burlington, believe it or not.
yeah.
And that's a little bit, and when you look at it, it looks kind of like a classic old Episcopal church, the way it's built of redstone
Yeah.
and so forth.
All right, so all right, a question out of the blue here. Anybody remember where the first hockey rink was in Burlington? I was superintendent of parks at the time, so I remember where it was put.
well, Roosevelt Park, when I was a kid, is where we'd go skating at night.
No, it was before Roosevelt, before even hockey started to get a grasp in Burlington.
Oh, hockey, not just
Hockey.
skating, hockey.
I'm sorry.
Um,
Anybody remember that?
Before Letty then, huh?
And this is way before Letty. I mean, it's
Well, I would, the first place I ever skated in an organized way was at South Park.
Yeah.
you got it. That's
Yeah.
the first place of I don't remember the guy's name, but he got a group of volunteers to set up the boards and he did his own thing. He spent like a lot of things that start out in Burlington. People spend a lot of their own time volunteering to get things done, and that was one of them.
Joey, I meant to ask you before, when you said you went to Thayer School when you lived out on Stanford, was that the old Thayer School where Apple Tree Bay Medical Center is, or was it?
Yes, it was Rosaire. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were in the basement of
Oh,
that
yeah.
old building. The
walls on
kindergarten.
the walls on that building are like 2 feet thick.
Yeah,
All
I
made with
know.
redstone.
Yeah.
And when you talk about North Avenue back in those days, in the 50s, when you got to Plattsburgh Avenue, there was a horse watering trough
Oh,
right in that Y. And that's where North Avenue stopped the pavement, and it was all dirt from there to the mouth of the river. And that's where the bus would make their turn. A little later in the 60s, they extended the pavement. The bus would go down to Pennington to turn around. But those early days in the 50s, it was all dirt from there out. That tells you how much development has taken place since then.
yeah.
Yeah, and then and the Millingtons, they had a huge amount of land that went from North Avenue all the way to Plattsburgh Avenue, and they used to raise fox back in there where people didn't see. Raise fox for their fur. Can you imagine?
Mhm.
I think it's interesting too to we should talk more about the area off North Street where there was such a large German population, where the German club is, and the Hockeys and the Heinegers, and a big group of Germans that settled in that area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I'm trying to get someone, Joey, to come on the program about the Greek community. There were a significant number of Greek folks that did a lot to improve Burlington, and I can think of Sox Zalotis for one, and you mentioned
The Economos,
the Economos and
Jim Condos.
Condos to this day. Yep, Jim Condos, and a lot of the Greek community. And you mentioned Stratty Lyons and Tony Adams. All those people. I mean, I'm trying to get someone. I called an attorney one time to get on the show to do that. I never got a call back, but we have a lot of those communities in Burlington, the German community, the Jewish community, Italians. And I've been trying to get Jane Roll at Mackenzie to come back on, and we'll keep working on that one. Joe, you were talking about going to school. Remember your school hours when you went to high school? What were those hours? 8 to 1:30 or
No, 3:30.
8 to 3:30? Joey?
I think I went to Rice, and they had we had split times. The junior and seniors went in earlier and got out earlier, and then the freshmen and sophomores. So it was two different things. I think as a freshman and sophomore, you didn't get out till about 3, but the juniors and seniors would get out about 2, I think.
Do you know why they did that? I mean, looking at what's happening today.
They didn't have room, I guess. I'm not sure, or it could have been the buses as well. The buses probably were what determined the 2 different starts.
Okay.
And that I learned, that land was owned by the Catholic diocese because some bishop had bought it previously with having a cemetery there. And then I guess Resurrection Park came in. So that was all land that was already owned by the diocese when they chose that to build Rice High School.
Okay. Tom, you were mentioning your summer camp out at the Spalding's Bay, was it? Or
Star Farm Beach.
so, is there glebe land out there? And what was that on glebe land?
I think there is glebe land out there, but I don't think Star Farm Beach is on glebe land, Bill. I probably should know more about that. Star Farm Beach was way back a farm, originally the Star Farm, and the University of Vermont got a hold of a big chunk of it. And then John Flynn bought everything from North Avenue down to the lake in the late 1890s. And he built a nice cottage down there for himself and his wife, Nellie. And then he started leasing out lots to his friends. And there's still a good group of owners out there who have their roots back in the teens and 20s of last century.
Yep.
Wow. So what is glebe land? I think I know what it is, but you must.
Well, it's land that was set aside when the state was first chartered and laid out, that was assigned for the church. So if you if you go back the land titles long enough, for example, the land directly north of the Unitarian Church, it was all glebe land. And the law of that roughly was that people who bought on that on glebe land had to pay an annual land rent that ultimately went to whatever church was the beneficiary of that going way back. And that's largely been evolved out of that. But that's, if you look at the original charters of the original maps of the towns in Vermont, in most towns, you'd see a lot or more than one lot laid out for church purposes.
There were actually 4 different types of what we generally call glebe land, and one was a school, one was minstrel, and the one called glebe by that name. I forget what the 4th one was, but they were like about the size of what you think of a section. I forget what the acreage was, and as the people that own within those areas had to pay a lease, and it was fairly small. But the purpose of it was, like for the minstrel one, was to raise the money for supporting a minister to run a church, and the school one obviously was to help support the school, and the one called glebe was for the Church of England. And up until, well, during the time that Ray Contois was treasurer, towards the end, when you broke that all up, that lot up to the little lots, like I live on one of those on Tracy Drive, and my 70 by 90 lot, I would get a bill for like 17 cents or 23 cents or something like that, which was my portion of what that allotment was. And so Ray decided it's costing more for the envelope and the postage than it is to mail the bill. So what he did, he set aside some money into an escrow so that the interest would pay for that, and he stopped billing the homeowners. And that's the way it's been ever since. And once a year at a certain time, a check would be sent to the Church of England. So that's that's kind of well, a little more than general. There's more of the specific type of history to that. I just don't remember some of the other details to it. But a professor down in Middlebury College had a book that was very well written and kind of renowned as being more of an authority on description of each of these different types. There's that book, a guy named Burgard, and that book is at the Fletcher Free Library. I went down, I had one, and I went to donate it to them, and they said, no, we've got one. We don't need another one, and nobody ever rented it, leases it out. So that's the history behind that kind of land.
Tom, do the Littles still have property at Star Farm?
Yes. My sister and I have the cottage that my father's father bought in 1929.
Wow.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, well, all right. So I prepared some questions for someone not long ago, and I want to review them for you. I'll mention four. That some of these are real easy, but one of these is I'm going to mention four names. Which one was not a news anchor for Channel 3 News? Was not a news anchor. Red Martin, J.A. Sullivan, Mickey Gallagher, Marcellus Parsons. Which was not a Channel 3 News?
The owner.
Stuart Martin.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. These are kind of easy. What was the old street name of what is now known as Riverside Avenue? North Bend Street, Archibald Street, Ethan Allen Parkway, Lower Road.
Lower
Road.
Or
So you're 2 for 2. Oh, this is real easy. Which one is not a mayor of Burlington? Rosaire, you're not eligible to answer this. John Burns, John Fitzpatrick, Doug Cairns, Ed Keenan.
John Fitzpatrick.
You got it. Okay. See, hey, Rosaire would have jumped all over that one.
That was James Fitzpatrick. The Fitzpatrick that was mayor was Jim Fitzpatrick. And
John Fitzpatrick was city assessor.
that's right, his brother. And you talk about the Fitzpatrick, you might all remember they had the garage down on Sears. Where was the original garage located? Where Jimmy owned it? John worked there as a parts man.
Lakeview Terrace.
Correct. And my father-in-law was good friends with Jim, and he used to go there a couple times a week, and he would sit and chit chat with him with a Budweiser in his hand. And I'll spill the beans. When it was decided that I should go into the fire department, my father-in-law goes to the mayor, Jimmy Fitzpatrick, and says, I got a son-in-law that would like to be in the fire department. Don't worry about it. 3 months later, I was in the fire department.
Where on Lakeview Terrace was the Fitzpatrick garage?
Quite a ways up to the north. Probably, oh God.
Was it near their house?
Yeah.
Well, no. They lived, if you went in at the far end of Lakeview Terrace,
Yeah, I remember the Fitzpatrick
at the
house.
very end on the left, that was their house.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the lake side.
Yeah.
Their garage was probably on the other side of the road, and somewhere is probably about eight buildings down or so.
Wow.
If I'm standing there, I can pick it out, but I can't remember them.
No, I have another one. You bring up a good point. You remember where Earl's Bicycle Shop started business?
Archibald Street.
Yes.
Yeah, and right next door was another fella's bicycle shop.
Wow.
They were-
Rosaire, you're good at this. You're good at
Well, I lived in the old, after Lower Cherry Street, we were there only about a year and a half or so, and then we went up to Cedar Street right near Elmwood Avenue. So up through there was my neighborhood and Roosevelt Park and the Boys Club. Once the Boys Club went out there, that's where I hung out a lot.
Well, all right. If you know all that, what was the name of Roosevelt Park before it was Roosevelt Park?
Oh, that one I don't know.
Shaw's something?
Yeah, Shaw's Lot.
Wow. No,
Shaw's Lot.
never heard that.
Okay, here's another one. Let's see. At the end of Burlington's breakwater, there was an attractive spout of water. Its name?
Carnes Folly.
Was it the Friendship Fountain?
That's what it was started to be called,
Yeah.
Friendship Fountain.
Then
But
it
it was-
evolved into the Carnes Folly.
Well, the Mayor Carnes
Doug
was
Cairns.
the one that promoted it, and they ran a pipe underwater all the way out to the end, and he wanted it to be a fountain. But the trouble is, they only built one single pipe that went up in the air so many feet. So when the water came out of it, it was just a spout, like instead of spreading out like a fountain and everything else. And he started being ridiculed, but with it, calling it Carnes Follies. He never lived that down. And after about a year, maybe 2 years, they did take it down.
Mm.
Well, I don't know what we're doing on time here, folks, but I supposed to have a timer here and it petered out. So I think it's, I don't know if our producer, Aiden, how are we doing on time? Or we're not? Okay. All right, well, time to wrap up, I guess. Thank you, Rosaire, Tom, and Joey. I think we've had a good program here, and we'll just keep up thinking about Burlington, the good old days when milk was 19 cents a quart and pot was, well, that was something in which you planted a flower. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next time on Stump The Chumps.
It was fun.
Thank you.